the League is celebrating its centennial this year, the 100 years of nonpartisan voter registration, voter education through events and forums like the one this evening. The League is a political organization, I will say that, in that it does support various issues, but it never supports or opposes political candidates or political parties. Our mission is empowering voters and defending democracy. I'm very pleased that we have with us tonight the candidates for Washington's 9th Congressional District, Adam Smith and Doug Basler, as well as those for the 41st Legislative District. Thank you all very much for your willingness to come forward and serve the people of these districts, and also for participating in this forum. I'm also pleased that for this event we share the sponsorship with Congregation Herzl Ner Tamid and the Faith Action Network, who've contributed a lot in their time and energy to this forum. So now I would like to ask Rabbi Jacob Herber of the congregation to say a few words. He will then introduce our moderator for the evening. So, Rabbi.
Good evening. The Jewish community, like other minority communities, has flourished in America, a nation that champions government of the people, by the people, for the people. My faith tradition, Judaism, calls upon us to pursue justice and govern ourselves through fairness and the rule of law. The Torah, the 5 books of Moses, recognizes the need for a justice without bias as fundamental to the functioning of society, as is written in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 15, you shall not render an unfair decision. And the Talmud, the anthology of ancient rabbinic law and lore, acknowledges the role the people must play in selecting their own leaders. A ruler is not to be appointed unless the community is first consulted. This value is enshrined in the Declaration of Independence, which says that the government derives its just powers from the consent of the governed. Whether we belong to a faith tradition or community, are atheist or agnostic, we still have a solemn responsibility to elect those who will serve as our political leaders, those who will govern us. And in order to do that responsibly, we need to be educated citizens, informed about the issues, policies, and positions taken by those who wish to lead us, which is why this forum is so important. It's our opportunity to learn about the individuals who seek our support, our vote. Herzl Ner Tamid is honored to serve as the virtual host for this candidates forum, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Seattle-King County, the Faith Action Network, and Herzl Ner Tamid. On behalf of my congregation, I want to welcome all the members of the League, the Faith Action Network, the many voters who have joined us, and of course, the candidates who are with us this evening. The moderator for this forum is Alyssa Weed, President, League of Women Voters of Seattle-King County. Alyssa?
Thank you, Rabbi. I grew up in the 41st/the 9th, so it is an absolute pleasure to be with you here tonight. So I understand there's some power outages through the area. So in the event of a power loss or another technical glitch, we will work to reconnect as quickly as possible on our end. But for those of you watching, you may need to sign in again. So I'll briefly go over the ground rules and we can go ahead and get started. So first and foremost, I will be moderating and asking the questions and enforcing the rules. Candidates will have 2 minutes for an opening statement and 30 seconds for a closing statement. The candidate running unopposed will have 3 minutes for a statement and will not participate in the Q&A. The candidate listed first alphabetically will answer first. The order of answering will then be rotated. The time for answers may range from 30 seconds to 3 minutes, and I'll let you know the time allotted when the question is asked. The timer 15 seconds are left. Stop is displayed when time is up. The speaker may finish their sentence, at which point, if you continue, I will turn off your mic if you exceed past that point. Little perk of Zoom makes that a bit easier. Questions have already been developed by the sponsoring organizations, and they have been submitted by the public. So there might not be time to ask all of the questions because there were so many, which is awesome. Candidates have not been given questions ahead of time. And then the forum will be recorded for use by the league. No other recording of this forum is allowed. And the recording may be shared in its entirety only with permission by the League of Women Voters. Okay, sound good to everybody? All right, we're gonna go ahead and get started then. The first question will go to Mr. Basler. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement. Oh, and I apologize. We are starting with the candidates for the U.S. House of Representatives for Congressional District 9, Doug Basler and Adam Smith. Mr. Basler, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement. Please include why you are running and how you would work with others who are not in your party. Mr. Basler.
Forgot to unmute, sorry. You know, after doing Zoom all this time, you think you'd remember that. Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you guys tonight. My name is Doug Basler. I'm running for Congress in the 9th District. I believe that you deserve representation that listens to you. You deserve to be heard and understood. The U.S. House is the closest representative to the people because of having to be elected every other year. It's also the most powerful branch of government. It has the power of the Treasury, the power of oversight, and I just believe that representatives must serve the voters. I've been saying for a few years now, and I still believe it, that public service should be like jury duty. Regular people like you and I should go serve for a while and then return home and live under the laws that we outpass. I believe that's real accountability. Career politicians a lot of times can be a problem in government, and that's been demonstrated in real time with the handling of the coronavirus lockdowns. The good intentions that started the process quickly devolved into political favoritism and opportunities to advance agendas, and this should never happen in an emergency or any other time. The suspension of our civil rights is outrageous, and no freedom-loving American should ever stand for it. I will always fight to defend your rights, your constitutionally protected God-given rights. I believe that you should have the ability to live your life as you see fit and be free from unnecessary government interference. And I think that people can make their own decisions about their health and their wellness. I'm a pro-life, pro-Trump Republican, and I just believe that, you know, I can be a good, strong alternative in the 9th District. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Basler. Representative Smith, same question to you.
Thank you. Well, and I appreciate the League of Women Voters and all the work they've done to promote democracy and promote participation in our political process. And I actually think that's the most important issue in this election is now more than ever, we need leaders who are going to bring people together and try to solve problems, not to come at it from one partisan ideology or one particular agenda, but who are going to listen and work together. And that's, you know, what I've built my entire career on. I've lived my entire life in this district. I grew up in SeaTac, and since then I've lived in Kent, Tacoma, and now Bellevue. And I'm absolutely committed to the people of the 9th District and committed to making sure that their voice is heard in Congress. That is my priority and what I have worked on throughout my entire career. I think it's incredibly important right now that we bring those people together. And, you know, one issue Doug and I do disagree on, I don't think it should be like jury duty. I think experience is a factor. And I think we've seen that with Donald Trump. Donald Trump had no experience whatsoever in government, and it shows. His response to the pandemic has been an epic disaster that has cost the lives of at least tens of thousands of people and done more damage to the country than it should. And in large part, it's because Donald Trump doesn't listen to anybody. He knows everything. He'll tell you that every second of every day. When asked, you know, what do you think you could have done better or could have done wrong? Nothing. I've done it all perfectly. Well, I am the polar opposite of that. I believe in listening, working with people, admitting when you've made mistakes, and then pulling people together. And to your last point, I'll absolutely represent everybody in my district, whether they voted for me or not. I've done outstanding outreach. My staff has done outstanding outreach because we understand that principle. It's not about me, it's about the people I represent. I'm committed to this district and committed to addressing the very serious problems that we face as a district and as a country. And I'm absolutely convinced that I'm the best person to represent this district and the people in it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. Representative Smith, the first question will go to you. The United States has struggled for over 8 months to contain the coronavirus. With predictions that more pandemics will occur in the future, what policies, programs, or actions would you support now to prevent further spread of the virus? And what could Congress do better to prepare us for the next pandemic? You will have 2 minutes for this question. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, first of all, in this particular pandemic, I want to be clear that all across the world, people have struggled with this. No question. There was no easy answer. Nobody was going to do something that was going to automatically protect everybody and protect the economy. We were going to struggle. But we've struggled far more than we should have. And when you look globally, the executive branch response on this has us pretty near the bottom in terms of dealing with the problem. And the biggest problem is we didn't use the tools that were put in place. The CDC has been trained for 75 years for a pandemic. Trump sidelined them and didn't follow their advice, even something as simple as masks. And yes, I know originally they said no, but you learn as you go. That was the point of my opening. And what we learned is they make an enormous difference. They save lives and they are almost no inconvenience whatsoever to people. And yet Trump, consistently criticized that. So follow the CDC, follow the science. I think we could have better protected ourselves and then been free to do more. But when you have, almost 1,000 people a day still dying, to say that we should just throw it open and do whatever we want to do, it's costing lives. So what we need to do is we need to invest in the CDC, prepare and learn, use the science, use what we've learned and support public health. It would also help enormously if we had a better public health system. I mean, you can see the president, he, did just fine because he had the best healthcare in the world. He had teams of doctors around him 24/7. He got everything he asked for. We still have, millions of people in this country who don't even have health insurance. The Affordable Care Act was an important first step. It covered a lot of people. We need to update that and improve it, not tear it down. We need to cover more people so they have adequate health care. So adequate health care for the country, fund the CDC, and listen to them as we track the pandemic. The last thing I would say, international organizations matter. We certainly shouldn't be pulling out of the WHO. This is a global problem. We need to work with the world to address it.
Thank you. Mr. Basler, same question. With predictions that more pandemics will occur in the future, what policies, programs, or actions would you support now to prevent further spread of the virus? And what could Congress do to better prepare us for the next pandemic? That'll be 2 minutes for this one. Thank you.
Well, I think that freedom is always the best answer. And I think that people having choice in their healthcare is better than a government mandated system. I think that the lockdown has been a huge problem. Lots of businesses like mine, a small business, struggle. We lost 50, 60, 70% of our revenue almost immediately. That affected our employees, that affected me personally, it affected obviously our customers, and we have all these unintended consequences, or maybe intended. I don't even know if it's nefarious or not, but a pandemic that of this magnitude is not worthy of a shutdown. People that are dying from this pandemic are people that have underlying conditions. I'm a Christian guy. The Bible says it's the sick that need a doctor, not the healthy. And to quarantine the healthy, I think, is a mistake. I think we need to protect at-risk people. I have a good friend of mine at church that has a son that was premature. He's got heart issues and a lot of underlying conditions. Yeah, protect that guy. But healthy people, let them work. Let them go. We need to get herd immunity. Sweden is a great example of this. They didn't do the aggressive lockdowns, and they had a great response. They've gotten close to herd immunity. They're practically running normal. And so things like, sports and movies and just people living their lives. I think it's important that we don't live our lives in fear. Americans, we're not descended from fearful men. There's going to be risk. We're never going to be able to just be free from death. I don't know if you've heard, but the mortality rate is still hovering somewhere around 100%. So we're all going to die someday. And I don't think that I want to take chances with public health, but on the other thing, this idea of controlling businesses
Mr.
and
Basler,
families with fear is a bad idea.
I'm going to have to stop you there. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, and actually a question back to you. So due to COVID-19, federal funds have been strained by relief efforts to aid those who've experienced difficulties in the pandemic, such as job losses. Mm-hmm. Now with the West Coast on fire and towns destroyed, how would you manage relief funds for both of these issues without increasing the U.S. deficit? Mr. Basler, you have 2 minutes on this one. Thanks.
Right, thank you. Not a big fan of continued debt bought relief for this. I think the best thing that we can do is get back to work, get the businesses back open, get people back to work. This the government doesn't have enough money. They don't have the money they've already spent, the $2 trillion plus that they've already spent for PPP and these other programs. The disaster of Jay Inslee here in Washington State with, billions of Washington State dollars going to internet scammers, not having proper safety protocols in place on our unemployment system. And so I think this thing is something that we need to look at. We need to manage our systems and our safeguards. But I'm not a big fan of continued, just let's give people a check and keep them at home. And I heard a story today about in England, there was an area that was impoverished and they paid the farmers not to grow food. And these farmers had been working from sun up to sundown their whole life. And so here's the same money you're making for growing a crop. Now don't grow crops and we're trying to control this thing. And the suicide rate went through the roof. And so we have all these unintended consequences. Suicide. I have my youngest daughter's senior in high school, her senior year's being destroyed. They're not at risk. High school students are not at risk. And just not a fan of big government bailout, and I'm not a fan of these lockdowns. I think we need to get back to the Constitution.
Thank you. Representative Smith, same question. With the West Coast on fire and towns destroyed.
I'm sorry, I heard the question.
Oh, okay, great.
No need to repeat. So, first, I have a son who's a senior in high school as well, so I feel your pain, Doug. It's been a tough year for the kids, year and a half. So, and it's going to continue to be a difficult year. But the reality is, economically, the single best thing we can do is get the virus under control. And actually, much of Europe has had a great deal of success. And you look at Asia, they've had a ton of success too. And the reason that they've been able to reopen schools and re-engage in activity is because they contain the virus. If you don't contain the virus, it spreads and creates massive problems. And one big area of disagreement I have with Doug is, unfortunately, the young, healthy people spread it to the people who are not young and healthy. You do have to take steps to try to protect from that spread. And the more community spread you have, the more risk you have. There was an absolutely heartbreaking editorial in the Washington Post this weekend about a guy from Dallas who very conservative. And he was one of those people, oh, this is overblown, no wearing masks, why are we doing all this? And so he decided to have a 2 or 3 day family gathering. Gay man, actually, his partner, and they had both of their parents and in-laws over. And they went to a lake or something for 2 or 3 days. It spread throughout. Long story short, 2-3 people wound up dead. Because it spreads. That's the problem. If you could simply isolate it to the people who are not at risk, that would be great, but you really can't. So what you need to do to get through the economic situation is contain the spread of the virus. Because if you contain it, if you test and trace, then you have less of it in the community, and then people can do more. And when an isolated incident pops up, you can contain it there. But simply letting everything go has created a massive problem in this country. And I'm with you on freedom except to the point where, my freedom is impinged every time I get in a car, as is everybody's is. You can't just drive through a red light because you're going to kill somebody. We need to balance freedom with good public health.
Thank you. Candidate Smith, California and Oregon have just seen the worst fires in their history, and Western Washington and our district were exposed to the worst hazardous air quality for over a week. Scientists tell us to expect drier, hotter conditions and more fires in the future due to climate change. If reelected, what actions, policies, or programs would you support to address climate change?
Yeah, first of all, 3 of the last 4 years have really been terrible in the state, as you know, and up and down the West Coast. The fires have been horrific, and we've had bad air. In fact, 2017 and 2018 it was for a longer period of time. It was most of the month of August that we were under a hazardous health situation. Yeah, we need to address climate change. There's a long explanation of that. But number one, accept the science and the reality of it. Don't deny it, and get us off of fossil fuels. That we need to rebuild our energy economy so that it is not dependent upon fossil fuels. If you burn fossil fuels, you are causing damage to the environment and increasing the temperature and causing climate change. So we need to work towards that. Now, that's not a short-term solution. That's not going to stop fires next year. But I have strongly supported efforts to invest in energy efficiency, first and foremost, and then alternative sources of energy. We have made enormous progress in wind and solar and in other forms of energy with biofuels. Make that investment, give us an energy future that isn't dependent upon fossil fuels, which are destroying the planet. We can make that investment and we can get there. Not overnight, it's going to take time, but we should at least try. And that's what really troubles me about the Trump administration right now is they don't care. They are actively working to burn more fossil fuels and undermine the development of alternative sources of energy. So number one, I would support that transition. But we also need to work in the short term on managing forest fires. We're doing something, we can do better in terms of forest management. Now, I will say a lot of the fires that started certainly in Eastern Washington weren't in forests, they were in brush. How do you manage brush? So it's going to be a difficult challenge as long as things stay hot and dry, but we should work up and down the coast to try to address that while we also take seriously climate change and begin to address it.
Thank you. Candidate Basler, same question, and you will also have 2 minutes. Do you want me to repeat the question?
Sure.
Okay. So if elected, what actions, policies, or programs would you support to address climate change?
Okay, so in light of the forest fires, so a single wildfire can put out as much carbon as 50 years of all the fossil fuel burning going on in Seattle for, decades. And, part of the problem with the forest management is that the current forest management is a result of climate change knee-jerk activity. So those forests, most of the forests were planted 50, 60 years ago in a way that they were to be harvested. They were planted as crops. And so the trees are too close together and they've gotten too big. A single tree can hold 100 gallons of water in like a foot of height. So they're using up all this groundwater. That's a huge problem. And so proper forest management, I agree with Representative Smith in that we really need to bring that back. And at least in the forests, I agree with him. There's not much you can do in the brush. I mean, I went through the Okanagan area over there and Omak and stuff just a couple of weeks ago. It's devastating. It's terrible. It's awful. But yeah, I think that fossil fuels are actually, not as big of a problem as our reaction to, these climate change things. And so a lot of times our reaction is worse. And so we have these terrible wildfires going on and they're putting out way more carbon than we'd ever put out from SUVs and, trucks that bring us our food and, ways that we heat our home and that type of thing.
Thank you. And for the candidates, we are now moving into I won't call it rapid fire because it's not really, but we will be going from 2 minutes to 1 minute for answers. And Candidate Basler, back to you. The National Environmental Policy Act was enacted in 1970 under President Nixon. An increasing number of the regulations have been rolled back recently, which has impacted water and air quality. The requirements for environmental impact studies on infrastructure projects have also been rolled back. Do you support or oppose these deregulations? Why or why not? And that is 1 minute. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm not familiar with specifically with what you're talking about, so it's going to be difficult, but I can tell you that, as just a middle-class guy that, I've got kids, adult kids now and grandkids, and, a lot of these regulations and impact statements, things like that, these things are used as a way to raise money for governments, and they radically increase the price of housing. And so we have a housing crisis. We have a problem with not enough units, not enough housing. It's abnormally forcing the price of housing up. And so I think we need some common sense reform in environmental impacts. I'm an outdoorsman. I'm getting ready to go hunting in a couple of weeks, and I love to be outside. I love to be, I love the environment, and I want to protect it. But sometimes the stuff is used in a way to enrich like local governments and things like that. So I'm against that.
Thank you. Candidate Smith, the same question in 1 minute as well.
Yeah, no, I do not support the Trump administration approach to rolling back NEPA. And that's not to say that every regulation is sacrosanct or needs to be maintained. A balance does need to be struck. But when you look across the country, clean air and clean water, when President Nixon put in place NEPA and SEPA and created the EPA, he was facing a situation where clean air and clean water were in jeopardy, and they continue to be. I mean, we've had the situation in Flint, Michigan, and elsewhere where the drinking water becomes undrinkable. So you need to make sure that you're protecting the groundwater and protecting the air so that we can drink water and breathe. Now, do governments always do that exactly right? No, they don't. I don't agree that they're doing it just to raise money. I think what they need to do is they need to work with businesses. They need to work with the agriculture sector and see if there is a way to do it to balance interests and needs. And that's not what the Trump administration is doing. They're simply gutting the regulations and making no effort whatsoever to balance it. So I oppose the approach that he's taking.
Thank you. And this next question was submitted by the public, and Candidate Smith, you'll be the first, also 1 minute. Social media such as Facebook and Twitter have faced questions related to misinformation, disinformation, and extremist rhetoric. Do you feel there should be guidelines or controls over what may be posted on these sites similar to those for television and newspapers?
I think we need to work towards that, and I think the companies have been very irresponsible in thinking that they have no responsibility whatsoever. They just put out whatever. Now that's changing a little bit now, and they're trying to figure it out. And I think we should work to enact, I think we should work with the companies to appropriately deal with that issue. I'm very reluctant, however, to go too far with over government regulation, to have the government dictate exactly what can or cannot be said. A balance needs to be struck between First Amendment rights. And this has always been the history of our country. It's the cliche of you can't yell fire in a crowded movie house. Yes, you have free speech, but that freedom is not absolute. The courts and the legislators need to balance that regulation. And in the case of social media, for too long, there was no balance. There was no effort. You had some incredibly incendiary, damaging, and just terrible things being posted on the internet. So I think the legislative branch has a role to play here, but I want to be careful about it.
Okay, thank you. Candidate Basler, same question. Do you feel there should be guidelines or controls over what may be posted on Facebook and Twitter or similar sites, similar to the way that we regulate TV and newspapers?
Absolutely. I think I would like to see communication companies such as Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, et cetera, come under the purview of the Federal Communications Commission. I think that we could have decency guidelines and you know, kind of a you know, equal time and things like that. I think that just letting them run amok and you know, with no, you know, no oversight, I think it's a bad idea. I don't think that, so I agree with Adam. I think you've got to have, you know, if you're like with TV, right? If you have adult material, then you have warnings or you have certain hours or access. With you know, freedom of speech, I'm obviously a huge fan of the Constitution, but yeah, I think that, you know, that these companies, particularly when they act like big monopolies like they are, they should have some oversight.
Thank you. And right back to you. The Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty has held an arms race in check, but it is due to expire unless the United States extends it. In a world that has become increasingly volatile with many nations seeking to build nuclear weapons, would you extend the treaty or propose something else? And you have 1 minute. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, one of the biggest successes of the Trump administration was averting a literal nuclear war with Korea. I think that talking to Kim Jong-un was a great idea. And I would like to see those treaties come into play with nations such as Korea, Iran, et cetera. And yeah, I think we need to extend those treaties. You know, it's kept the peace, you know, for 60, 70 years. That's a pretty good idea. But definitely whatever we can do to stop the proliferation of nuclear weapons. And so I'm super proud of our president and the way he handled North Korea.
Thank you. Candidate Smith, same question, same time frame.
Yes. So the New START treaty, I think, is enormously important. And by the way, I agree with Doug. I think negotiating or at least talking with Kim Jong-un was much, much better than fighting him. But on New START, I'm worried about where the Trump administration is going because they have been talking about letting it expire. And I think that would be a huge mistake. Now, as we speak, I think they're in Finland trying to negotiate an extension to New START. And I think that would be important. If they can get an extension, that's great. If they can get a new deal, but they should extend it as is, even if they can't get a new deal. But ultimately, we need a broader deal. There are so many more weapons in play right now that both sides are developing that potentially could destabilize the balance of power on nuclear weapons. We need an open dialogue. And the last thing I would say, we need to bring China into this because China is a rising nuclear power as well, a rising competitor, at least with the US. So we need to have the major nuclear powers talking to each other, and we need to have treaties amongst them.
Thank you. And sticking with you, there are questions about future funding for Medicare and Social Security and whether or not these programs with the current benefits can be supported. How would you protect these programs? 1 minute. Thank you.
No, thanks. On Social Security, I've been co-sponsor of a bill for some time that would, up the payroll tax, scrap the cap, as they say. Basically, you're capped on how much Social Security tax you pay, and would adjust the benefits to send more benefits to people on the lower income side and extend the lifetime of the fund by, I forget, 50, 75 years or something. And I think that certainly makes sense because Social Security, it's the one part of our portfolio that is secure. You make investments in other places, but Social Security, you're clear that you have a defined benefit coming to you. On Medicare, by the way, this is a brutal question to answer in 1 minute. On Medicare, we need to reform healthcare. We spend way too much money on healthcare. We don't get what we pay for. Our current healthcare system is incredibly inefficient. That drives up the cost of Medicare, Medicaid, healthcare. It's devastating. Look around the world, a whole bunch of people have much better healthcare systems than we do.
Thank you, and I appreciate your brevity and sticking to the 1 minute.
That was the quickest you've done it, Adam. Good job.
Candidate Basler, how would you protect Medicare and Social Security?
So I think that I don't think we want to remove the cap on the Social Security, but I do think that we need to remove the rating of the trust fund, which is pretty much non-existent. I think that Social Security money should be protected. It should be invested. It should be treated like any other retirement plan rather than just another way for government to, fund the projects or I don't know, the deficits and stuff. But Medicare situation is a perfect example of why we do not want socialized healthcare in America. Medicare is a huge, it's a fiasco. I know doctors that they can't take it. They're underpaid. It's underfunded. It's not a good system. And so it really needs to be relooked at.
Thank you. And also thank you for sticking to the 1 minute. But we'll stay with you for this one. So a free press is one of the core principles of the U.S. Constitution. Newspapers are one of the ways that people receive information about current, local, regional, and national issues. 1,800 newspapers have disappeared across the U.S. since 2004. So 2 questions on this one. Is this concerning to you? And if elected, would you support the Local Journalism Sustainability Act, or HR 7640, preserving local newspaper journalism and reforming newspaper ownership? 1 minute. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good one. What's a newspaper again? I'm just kidding. I saw a really interesting kids show on Nickelodeon one day. My daughter was watching it. It's a few years ago. And this guy came running in and he said, I left $5,000 in a newspaper. And so it was on a spoof on A Wonderful Life. And he left and they looked at each other and they go, who reads the newspaper? So the newspaper is definitely taking a hit. Whether we should prop that up with government money, I don't know. I think the free market, people are getting their news other ways. I think we just got to let the free market do it. I'm hoping, I like the paper, but I'm an older guy, and it'd be great to keep them around, but I think the market has to determine it, and I don't think that we need to, NPR everything. So.
Thank you. Candidate Smith, same questions to you.
Yeah, it is very concerning. The consolidation is really the issue. You've had all these local newspapers and local TV stations gobbled up by a few mega companies nationwide, and you lose the local flavor and you lose a focus on information, and it becomes more of a marketing ploy. We've seen Fox News, MSNBC, try to generate information by playing to people's outrage on one side of the equation or another. I think there is an enormously important place for local community newspapers. Now, the act that you refer to, I forget the specifics of it. It doesn't really amount to a government bailout. It amounts to protecting them from that competition, from the people coming in and buying them out and consolidating. And I think I think it's the FCC, has not done a good job of, protecting, but using the antitrust laws that are available to them to stop that sort of unfair competition. So if you can protect local newspapers by protecting fair competition, I'm for that. You're muted still.
Thank you. We are unfortunately coming to a close for our portion of this segment of tonight's program. So we are going to go ahead and move into our 30-second closing statements. Candidate Smith, the first 30 seconds goes to you. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and I appreciate the chance. So I think we have an incredible opportunity in this election. As I said at the outset, it's very important that we elect people who are committed not to partisan politics and extremism, but bringing people together and solving problems. I've been committed to that in this community for 50 years. And I'll say I live under the laws just like everybody else. I've lived here my whole life. Power goes out, my power goes out. Schools get shut down. My kids don't go to schools. I'm connected to this community, and I have the experience to deliver for the people here. And I would ask for your vote in the election November 3rd. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Basler, your 30-second closing statement.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate Adam Smith. He's served a long time. He's a decent guy. We actually agree more than we disagree. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be able to give the voters of the 9th District a choice and I will serve you. I will listen to you and do my best if you give me your vote on November 3rd.
Thank you to you both. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Okay, we're gonna work some Zoom magic and swap out some candidates, swap in some candidates. Just a moment. All right, and we are all present and accounted for. So we are now moving on to the candidates for State Senate from Legislative District 41, Mike Nykreim and Lisa Wellman. So we're gonna. Sorry. I think everybody is still muted.
I'm not.
Oh, wonderful.
I unmuted myself.
I'm in there. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, great. Thank you so much for unmuting yourselves. Okay, we were going to go ahead and do 2 minutes for opening statements again. So candidate Nykreim, you have 2 minutes for your opening statement. Please include why you are running and how you would work with others who are not in your party.
Hey, thanks. And thanks for hosting this forum. You know, I like to, I've been doing a bit of doorbelling, maintaining some safe distance. Since I'm only about 6'9" tall, I've got about a 7-foot wingspan, and I hold my distance. But as I meet people at the door, I tell them a little bit about myself and the reason why I'm running. And I like to let people know that, you know, I live in a house that's been in the my wife's family for over half a century. Is built new for them back in '65. And, you know, we not only raised our families here, but my own family, when my older daughter graduated from the University of Washington, became the 5th generation of women to graduate from the University of Washington. She also became the 7th University of Washington varsity letter winner. So our family goes back, you know, quite a ways. And in my campaign, I talk about how 2 of us varsity letter winners were a little bit lazy. We played football, but 5 rowed in crew. And I talk about how one thing about putting together a boat, you know, it takes a crew to row that boat. And I mentioned that I feel that we've got plenty of people down on Olympia on the left-hand side of the boat, and it's time to put some people on the right so the boat can go straight. And people appreciate that. I mentioned my background as a business owner. I've signed the face of thousands of paychecks in my 35-year career of owning a business. I own 2 businesses currently. I'm a general contractor. I'm also a deep foundation contractor. Plus, I do more than just a little bit on the world of natural gas, of installing clean burning, low emission natural gas in vehicles. And I've also recently set up the first renewable natural gas fueling station in the state's history, which is a lot of fun. So I'm running to bring together my level of experience to Olympia, where I'm not seeing a lot of experience from a business aspect. Thanks.
Thank you. Candidate Wellman, your opening statement, please.
Thank you so much. I am State Senator Lisa Wellman, and it's been my honor to serve the 41st Legislative District for the past 4 years. I serve as chair of the Early Learning and K-12 Education Committee in the Senate, and we've invested in our education system, changing the funding model to comply with the state's constitution, but also to focus on outcomes, creating a model for mastery-based education. The governor's initiative on Career Connect Washington is making a difference, leading to alignment with the 21st century economy. We want better outcomes for special education students to improve their graduation rates, safer schools, and we're working on a number of different things right now. I was the prime sponsor for 5511 to reestablish the broadband office and make it eligible for federal funding, one of the requirements. And of course, to ensure that each and every child in our state has the connectivity that they need for education. We have better outcomes for special education students, as I said, but also for the fastest growing, safer schools, for the fastest growing group of excuse me, sexually transmitted diseases, which is our teenagers, and working on issues surrounding suicide. We have over 105 kids committing suicide each year. The bullying and stresses on our LGBTQ kids, we've worked on that. And I am running for re-election to continue the challenging work that we have at this time of crises. There's so much more to be done, working on equity and institutional racism, and bringing us through this crisis with a Washington that works better for each and every Washingtonian. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will stick with you. So this is a question that came in from the public, and you'll have 2 minutes for this one.
Okay.
So in light of the anticipated state budget shortfall due to the pandemic, where would you look to make spending cuts, and or how might you seek to raise more revenue?
Thank you. Well, first of all, fortunately, because of our strong economy, our budget shortfall is going to be almost half as much as we thought it was going to be, which is a very good sign. We've already made cuts of 15% with our state workers across the state. They've taken furloughs and we've cut those budgets. I've been very concerned with anything that really attacks or seeks to limit our social support systems. We've done that in the past. It has devastating effects. It maintains the recovery. It stretches out the recovery to so much longer, and it really hurts the very people that we don't want to hurt. So I am on the tax structure work group. I just spent 2 hours today, 2 hours on Friday, looking at where our taxes are, what we can potentially do in changing some of the things, that we have, not necessarily running in their helter-skelter, but certainly to do things in a more progressive, less regressive way. I also have said that I will be supporting a capital gains tax. I think that's one tax that unfortunately the Senate was not ready to go forward with, but I think that things are changing. And that's one thing that I definitely would look at. It's really strange to know that at this time when so many people are hurting, I know that my portfolio has grown, and that seems just, I'm willing to pay my fair share to really help the state. So thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Nykreim, same question. In light of the anticipated state budget shortfall due to the pandemic, where would you look to make spending cuts, or how might you seek to raise more revenue?
So as a current business owner, we're caught right in the middle, especially COVID. Fortunately, our president made the very bold decision to cut off travel from China, which is where the infection came from. Then he relied upon his division managers, called governors, to make the right decision. Unfortunately, our governor made a disastrous decision for the state of Washington. Jay Inslee allowed an incredible release of travel across our state instead of shutting things down when he could have. And then when he realized his mistake, he shut down our industry, and he shut it down hard. Unfortunately, he was very partisan about it. Jay Inslee allowed public sector construction go ahead, private sectors construction such as mine. He shut us down hard. It was very partisan, and it was very unfortunate. Caused billions of dollars of tax shortfall. We get our taxes out of sales tax. Right now, one way we can get tax revenues going is release the building permits. I got so many government entities sitting on my building permits for no good reason. My last house just took me 2 years to get permitted out of the city of Seattle. Release the building permits. Let's get the sales tax revenue from construction going. We got to address spending. One issue I bring over and over again is 2 recent high school rebuilds. Issaquah High School, Sammamish High School, just rebuilt over the last 10 years. Issaquah rebuilt for $78 million. Sammamish, that was 10 years ago. Sammamish rebuilt for $200 million. Worst part of that is Sammamish has half the student body of Issaquah. Now we have out of control state infrastructure spending going on. I'm in the construction industry. I'd get a handle on that. And then last thing what I'm going to do is cut any salaries for our teachers. So half my family members out there must be public school teachers, right? I'll never get invited back to another family reunion or picnic if I cut their salaries. Salaries off the table. However, some of the other costs of public employees we need to address the way a business owner such as myself knows how to do.
Thank you. And we're going to stick with you, and you will have 1 minute for this next question. So the move towards remote learning during the coronavirus pandemic has revealed the technology gap within student populations across Washington. Basic education is a constitutional right in this state, and access to computers and broadband will become more and more essential. What would you propose to bridge this gap? And again, 1 minute. Thank you.
Okay, 1 minute to answer this question, but I'll attempt. Again, as I look at my own family members as teachers, and also my own grandchildren struggling with online meetings, we got to put the younger kids back in the classroom. We can do this. I understand the infection issues looking at it. We're concerned about it. There is an issue with the older teachers, and we just got to put it out there. We need a younger teacher to help our kids get back in the classroom. It's being done in other states. We know we can do this. Not talking full time, but at least blend these things together. And then that way we can do a little bit better job sharing equipment and making sure that, everybody's got access to education. But we got to get the kids back in the classroom for just a whole lot of reasons. One thing, because of the pandemic last year, I point out the loss of last quarter's education cost our state $15 billion in education of our own children. So we've got to get the kids back in the classroom and protect our teachers, including my own family members.
Thank you. Candidate Wellman, same question, same time frame. What would you propose to bridge the broadband and technology gap? You're muted still.
I'm sorry, thank you. So as I said before, my bill to recreate the broadband office was very important in helping us get significant access to federal funds. And that is certainly going to help us go out to the unserved areas of our state where kids don't have the kind of broadband that we have in the 41st district. They also need devices. We're probably tens of thousands of devices down, although we have supplied many devices across the state. I was with SpaceX Starlink satellite systems this morning because we're looking at communities like the Ho out on the west side of the state who had no service whatsoever and are now getting better service than I have in my home using that satellite system that they put up. So we're working daily with professional development for our teachers and schools. It's local control. Schools choose whether they open or not. We don't.
Thank you. And we're going to stick with you. Also 1 minute for this next question. According to scientists, the devastating fires and hazardous smoke seen this summer and previous summers are indications that the climate is changing. Washington is the only state on the West Coast without a clean fuel standard, which would require fuel producers and importers to reduce pollution from fuels that power transportation. Do you support a clean fuel standard? Why or why not?
Yes, I do support a clean fuel standard. And actually, we have seen with fewer cars on the roads that we've already seen the change in our atmosphere and in the impact that fuels have on our atmosphere. Again, it was interesting today. I was with Varian Electric, who's bringing out electric cars and is now going to be serving the entire Amazon fleet with electric vehicles. Thank you, Amazon, for recognizing the challenges that we face with fossil fuels. So I think it's very important that we start looking at the electrification of our state, where transportation is one of the major causes of the air pollution. I also think we have to do more in terms of our fire. Having a room 2 years with our Commissioner, Hilary France, I know how hard she works on that. We have to do more on both our lands as well as federal lands to clean up the forests and hopefully prevent some of the forest fires.
Thank you. Candidate Nykreim, same question.
Got it. Okay.
Got it. Okay.
So, thank you. I just, I spent my first summer out of high school working in the forest, falling timber. on our state forest land. I earned my first year's college tuition that way as a choke setter and timber harvester. Following that, I became a builder. And as a builder, I adopted into the very first green build standards in the state's history. Part of the Seattle Master Builders endeavor is we set the standard nationwide. Also, instead of just talking about this, I actually converted my own vehicle to run on natural gas. My vehicle runs I've saved 70,000 pounds of CO2 in my vehicle by that conversion. I convert other vehicles. I've also set up the first renewable natural gas filling station. Instead of talking about this, I do it. Okay, I actually do something about it. Big disappointment here with our state. Okay, Senator Andy Hill passed a clean fuel standard to implement on all of our state vehicles. It was supposed to have been done by 2017, and it never happened. Companies like mine went down and showed the state how they could have saved millions of pounds of CO2, and they refused to do it. The problem is we can get started now, and I'm the kind of person who knows how to do it. Thank you.
Thank you. And this next question does come from the public, and you'll have 2 minutes for this, and we will stick with you. Washington's overcrowded prisons disproportionately house Black prisoners, many of whom serve life sentences without parole. Do you feel the criminal justice system needs reform? What might this look like?
So I think over and over again, we're on the wrong end of that spectrum. Since I'm a business owner, I'm also on the leadership council, on the leadership board of the National Association of Home Builders. I am the Seattle representative to the National Association of Home Builders. There's businesses nationwide are willing to step up and put together programs to educate our prisoners to get them ready to work. We have in the National Association of Home Builders, a Home Builders Institute, which is a nationally known institute, and I'd love to see it implemented in prisons. We were getting close to doing that last year, but COVID kind of set us back. And I like to be able to put together a condition where when the prisoners has finished their obligation, they're no longer prisoners, they become citizens, and they have jobs from people like me waiting for them. Now, this isn't just mere talk. The Seattle Master Builders has got some great candidates. Some great business owners who have actually sponsored prisoners into the system and made them, once again, effective part of our community and future leaders as they go back. Not just my business can do this, but Chamber of Commerce's all across our state can do the same. I like to work with those chambers to get the prisoners ready so they'll go back to prison. We need the help. We need employees. We need American employees. And I also want to be able to institute what I call the legalization of our business owners. We have a big problem nationwide with illegal business owners. And by reprioritizing the fact that we hire Americans for American jobs, then when somebody has finished an obligation, whether in prison or go the other end of the spectrum, coming out of high school, we've got some great jobs waiting for them so they can either continue their education or start to support themselves, or hopefully someday achieve what I think is a goal of great honor, and that is becoming an employer and a person who signs the face of a paycheck like I do. So that's how to address that, and that's how our National Association of Home Builders wants to step up and be a part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Wellman, same question, same time frame.
And I appreciate that. And this is one area where I certainly salute Mike and the work that he's doing. I think that that's excellent. And I really was shocked when I joined the legislature to find out, serving in the minority, that the majority at that time, the other party, did not feel that you wanted to do any training in or education in the prison system.
Yes.
What a shame. This is something that we really must change. But I think that I've been around a number of years now, and I've certainly seen how we have handled racism in our society. The number of times I thought what I was doing was really going to make a huge difference, and I was deluded, because we really it is institutionalized, and we really have to address it. I think that my hat's off to the Black Lives Matter movement. They really have unveiled for us the racism in our society. Why are there so many more Black prisoners? I think we have to look at the system. You know, I started my career in technology, and I'm a systems person. So why are there so many people who are in prison who are Black. And you look at the school system, you look at the inequities in terms of how we treat people through that system. You find out people in terms of their living conditions and what they have looking forward to in the future. I think we have to address the entire system, not only the prisoners, how they got there, why their sentences are so much stronger than white prisoners. We've looked at the data, we're looking at the data now, and it's there to be seen. So we've got to address the institutional racism, and we also need to look at our prison system and start reforming it, you know, inside, and then what happens to the prisoners, and hopefully they can have those opportunities that Mike is talking about to really start productive lives.
Thank you both. And Candidate Wellman, we're going to stick with you, and this will be our last question before we move into our closing statements, and you will have 2 minutes for this one as well.
Okay.
So according to the National Alliance to End Homelessness, 21,537 individuals experienced homelessness in the state of Washington in 2019, and our unsheltered population increased by 47%. What can we do to increase our sheltered population and decrease those experiencing homelessness? Should all local jurisdictions, Mercer Island, Eastside cities, be responsible to help with this effort?
Well, I anticipate that my opponent will have some good answers here as a builder, because he knows that there are times when our laws, our building permitting, our regulations make it so challenging. There even are taxes for the types of buildings that might be converted that would prevent people, there's no incentive for them to create housing for low-income people. And I think that there's a lot that we can do in terms of incentivizing the businesses to move in that direction. I also think that we have not addressed the problem in a system way. So we do know that people who are homeless, if they're put in shelters, they wind up going back to shelters. We're not giving them the wraparound services that they need to change their lives. It actually was interesting, as we've now put through this time, we've put people into hotels because of COVID and because the shelters were unsafe places. And it turns out that treating people decently, putting them in hotels, actually had a significant impact on what they felt about themselves and how they went back out into the community. That's the kind of thing we have to look at. I know one of the things that New York did at one time I thought was an amazing thing is they took a hotel that was going to be demolished and turned it into a place for homeless people with wraparound services there to treat the mental illness problems, to treat any addiction problems, to give them training on work. We have to address it as a systems, and I think that there's a lot we can do in that regard. And I hope Mike has some good answers here too.
Thank you. Candidate Nykreim, same question, same time frame.
And thank you, Senator Wellman, for the recognition. And frankly, thank you for working with the Building Association of Washington in the past. Earlier this year, the Wall Street Journal called me, the letters editor called me and asked my permission to publish what he called the best length to content letter in that editor's history with the Wall Street Journal. And I said, sure. And I was addressing housing affordability. And it was a letter I wrote where following a retirement party to the former head of the Seattle's planning department, Tana Senn, after listening up in an audience in Kane 120, where I spent many years in classrooms, and Diana was chastising us builders for our refusal to build affordable housing. I raised my hand, I asked Diana a question. I said, Diane, I've got a question. I said, why did you expect your high cost regulations were going to result in low cost housing? And you could have heard a pin drop in that audience. And her answer to me was priceless, and yet epitomizes the problem we have. Her answer to me was 4 words. What do you mean? And so the disconnect of regulations and how it affects our industry and everybody's housing, no matter what income level you're on, is enormous. My first house I built in Mercer Island, I like to tell people, I literally built the 41st. I built a home in every single city in the 41st. First house I built in Mercer Island in 1976, I had 6 inspections. I pulled a permit in the city of Bellevue in 2015, and I had 6 plus 46 inspections to build one house in the city of Bellevue. Now this is outrageous. I've also been part of a commissioner. I co-authored the city of Kirkland's upside down comprehensive plan back in 1995 to address housing costs. And we called it our 2020 plan. And guess where we are now? So within that planning and within my experience, I know the things we can do to make housing less expensive and create more affordable opportunities at all economic levels. And thank you for letting me go long.
No, thank you. And we'll stick with you for your closing statement, and it will be 30 seconds. Thank you. You're muted.
My hands just don't go. Here we go. Got it. Okay. I was on a forum earlier, and I was noted, along with other East Side representatives up and down Bellevue, a really amazing phenomenon that it just struck me. And that is, other than Larry Springer, none of the other East Side representatives lived here in our state in the last 30 years. And so we have really lost the connectivity that somebody like myself has going back generations. And I think it's time to get some people back in Olympia who really know how this state was built, the state that you guys moved here and learned to enjoy. And I'm the kind of person who can make sure that keeps going. 30 seconds, that was hard to do.
I know, it is hard. But
Good luck with that.
All right, and Candidate Wellman, 30 seconds to you as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We are working hard on reskilling workers, investing in small business, getting our kids the supports that they need, making sure childcare is available, transforming our education system to respond to the 21st century. My door is always open. I've tried to respond to every email, every call, and help with connectivity, unemployment payments, etc. There is so much more that needs to be done. It has been my honor to serve you, and I ask for your support in this election.
Great, thank you both so much. We so appreciate your time. And best of luck going forward.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we are now going to go ahead and do some more Zoom candidate swapping magic. So just one moment, please. All right, we are now going to go ahead and move into candidates for State House from Legislative District 41. Position 1, we've got Tana Senn, who is running unopposed. So Candidate Senn, since you are running unopposed, you will have 3 minutes for a statement. Please include why you were running and how you will work with others who are not in your party. Thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa. Thank you to the League of Women Voters for this forum and for having me join you today, even though I'm unopposed. It is a huge honor to be unopposed. And I like to think it's really about my efforts to always be reaching out to the community, to being very active and involved. I am a working mom of 2. When I first got into politics, I was a city council member here on Mercer Island. And my kids were little, and it's amazing to see how much they've grown up. And a lot of the work that I've done in the legislature has really been formed around our lives in terms of, and our experiences in terms of the difficulties facing working families. So a lot of my focus has been on ensuring that we have high quality education, that we are addressing gun violence so our kids aren't scared at school or on our streets. Making sure that families have access to childcare, which we know is both a racial equity and an income equity issue, allowing parents to get to work, businesses to have employees, and kids to have good development. Also focusing on reducing traffic to make sure that parents can get home to their dinner table and not be late to pick up their kids from childcare, but to spend that quality time at home. which of course during COVID, we are getting a lot of quality time with our families at home. While I've been in the legislature, I have championed also different issues. For instance, condominium liability reform, which I think is a great example of working across the aisle with Republicans and Democrats, having that be a huge priority on both sides. I've also worked on developmental disabilities issues, which tend to also be very bipartisan. One of my biggest claims to fame was passage of the first update to the equal pay laws in Washington state in 75 years. And that was a huge negotiation over a number of years working with business, House members, Senate members, women's groups, labor groups, Republicans and Democrats. And I'm extremely honored to have made those important changes into that equal pay law. And what we're seeing right now during COVID is that some of this work is being eroded mainly because of the lack of childcare. So we're seeing what some people are calling a female recession, and a lot of women postponing advancement or taking time off to make sure that they're allowing their kids to get through school and through especially because schools are closed. So I look forward to going back to Olympia to address childcare, to continue to work on gun violence issues, to ensure that we fight climate change, and that we continue looking out for our busy working families. Thanks again for having me tonight.
Yes, and thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time. And then again, we're gonna do some more Zoom magic where we swap some faces in and out. So just one moment. All right, it looks like everyone who is supposed to be here is here, and nobody who is not supposed to be here is not here. I think I said that correctly. Okay, so we're now moving into State House District 41, Position 2, Al Rosenthal and My-Linh. So we're gonna go ahead and start with our 2-minute opening statements. Candidate Rosenthal, you may go first, and please include why you are running and how you would work with others who are not in your party. Oh, you're muted. All right, I think you should be good.
Good. Yes?
Yes,
Oh,
loud and clear.
I was saying I don't see the clock any longer. Is there something happening?
It will start once you start your opening statement.
I'm a retired Boeing structural engineer. The vast majority of my current income is from office and retail property that my wife and I own, which we accumulated over a long period of time. I've been married to my wife, Wafa, who immigrated from Egypt in the 1960s for 36 years. I'm running up for office because I don't want to see the rest of the state of Washington become more unsafe like Seattle. I've run my life efficiently, and I believe I can run the state efficiently. We're going to having to look hard at the state budget. We must keep in mind the huge inflation-adjusted per capita spending increase that has taken place in the state. In 2017 dollars, it went from $4,600 in 1980 per person to $10,000 per person in 2017, doubled in per capita accounting for inflation. I support the police, and I think that the police as an institution are not racist, and the data proves it. I'm endorsed by both the American Coalition for Equality, Con Chu, and the Northwest Vietnamese News, Kim Phan. The reason they endorsed me is that My-Linh supported I-1000, which discriminates based on race, for admittance to Washington State universities, and Senate Bill 5395 and House Bill 2184, teaching sex education to K through 12 that is dictated by the state, not allowing it to be decided by the school districts where parents have a voice. I trust parents, not the state. In the last debate, My-Linh mocked me and claimed Bill 5395 gave control to the districts and parents. It does not. If it did, there'd be no reason for referendum 90. The school districts already had the right to teach sex ed without Bill 5395. They did not need to be ordered by the state. Schools should focus on math, science, and English. I still don't see the clock. Oh, I see it. Sorry, I had it covered.
No, it's okay. Thank you. Candidate Ty, your 2-minute opening statement, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to the League of Women Voters, who has been definitely the champion in the state, promoting voting rights and protecting democracy in our system. So for years, as I've been referred to myself as an accidental politician, I came to this country at the age of 15 as a refugee from a war-torn Vietnam in search for safety and an opportunity. At the same time, at an early age, I understood that this system was not built for people like me and my family, and I needed to work really hard to get to where I needed to be. Until I have my own children and get to support them in their own schooling. That was when I met some of our students who have the same struggle as I had way back when. And that was when I set out on the course of attempt to change the system so that every single child in our state have the opportunity to attain their dream. Being the first refugee elected to the state house, I am the voice of the vulnerable, and I believe in our potential. And because of that, I am running to be re-elected and continue serving in that capacity as a voice of those who have not had a chance to be at the table and in the room, really contribute to the conversations of policy that would impact their everyday lives. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to stick with you for our first question. This does come from the public, and you'll have 2 minutes to answer. So currently, police officers fired for misconduct in one department may apply for a job in another department without losing their certification. Do you feel Washington State Criminal Justice Training Commission's oversight is adequate, or does the decertification process need to be strengthened? If so, how?
Well, thank you very much for that question. I am fortunate to be selected as one of very few legislators in the House, really taking on the task of looking at how do we, at the state level, help steer the policy so that our police force, our peace officer continue to do the work that they are asked to do, which is to provide public safety for the public. And they are the people that we should come for help. They are the people that we trust. And so in the area of certifications, both the House and the Senate has been working on to strengthen the process of the certifications. That is, if a police officer commit a misconduct, and especially knowingly committing a misconduct, it needs to go through a full process and cannot be shifted from one department or one location to another. We are working with multiple police union to come to an agreement of how we make sure that is happening. And as we heard, a bad police officers is a bad news for the good police officers. And so the attempt at the state level is to make sure that we maintain the image of our law enforcement officers as the peace officer protecting the public.
Thank you. Candidate Rosenthal, same question, same time frame. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yeah.
Okay. So currently, police officers fired for misconduct in one department may apply for a job in another department without losing their certification. Do you feel Washington's State Criminal Justice Training Commission's oversight is adequate, or does the decertification process need to be strengthened? If so, how? And you have 2 minutes on this one.
Am I unmuted? Well, yeah, I actually think the current process is adequate. I think if someone is fired from one city and he wants to apply for a job in another city, I think everything should be shown to the other city as to why the person was fired. And if that city wants to hire that officer, feeling that maybe they were over judgmental in the other city, that city should be allowed to. I don't think being fired from Seattle should dictate that you can't be hired in Bellevue if Bellevue decides that you're okay. And what I really hate seeing is the media, the Democrats, constantly making the police sound to be bad, racist. Systemic racism is what they use. We don't have systemic racism. One of the articles in Bloomberg News was out in 2019. It used a study that they all use to show that the police are racist. It claimed that African Americans per capita in a lifetime have 2.5 times the odds of being killed by a white person. And I totally believe that. That's probably true. But what they don't talk about is Hispanics have a 1.36 factor. What they really don't talk about is that Asian Americans are killed at 0.37 times the rate of white people. So white people are killed 2.7 times higher per capita than Asians. And the reason for it is, if you look on the FBI website and you look on the census, Asians commit way less than half the crime of white Americans. So basically, your odds of being killed by a police officer is based on crime. And after you commit the crime, you resist arrest. It's not because the police are racist. And they're definitely not systematic racism. If anything, police are more afraid if they hurt a non-white person, they're going to get investigated more than if they hurt a white person. Thank you.
Okay, and we're going to stick with you for the next question. You'll also have 2 minutes for this one.
Sure.
So Washington has the most regressive tax system in the country. Do you believe a change is needed? And if so, what would you propose for other sources of revenue?
I think the tax system in this state is what has attracted all the business here. The type of tax system we have where we do not have an income tax has made it a place where companies want to come and open up their businesses. Till recently in Seattle with the complete chaos, the homeless, the looting, the rioting, well, that may discourage people. That's why they're going to Bellevue and not Seattle. But not having an income tax has made this a much more prosperous state. And when you talk about, you're saying it's regressive, on the sales tax portion, it is regressive. But on the, for instance, if we have a capital gains tax, that's totally on the people that make more money. If you look at property tax, that's all on the businesses and the property owners, and our property tax here is quite high. So people like to make it sound like the poor are paying an unfair amount of the tax. That's not true. Even in this state, the rich are paying way more tax. If you specifically look at just sales tax, yes, it's paid as a higher percent of income by the poor. But if you look at all taxes, that's not true at all. As far as any changes in the tax system, the one thing I could see doing with a sales tax, it's something from what I remember when I was in Pennsylvania in the 1980s, is on sales tax, we could consider not having a sales tax on low-cost clothing. You said, I don't know exactly how they did it, but there was a dollar number, and if you were below a certain dollar number buying clothes, you didn't pay a sales tax, because clothes are a necessity, just like food. And that's the only one change I could see making that would help people at lower income as far as taxes go. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Ty, same question, same time frame. Would you like me to repeat it?
No, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Yes, Washington has the most regressive tax system in the country. And I believe that they are needed to be changed. I think the audience have heard from Senator Wellman earlier in regard to this particular issues. I can share with you in the House, when we look at revenue, nothing is off the table for multiple reasons. As you know, even though the state is not facing with a deeper budget shortfall, we do face a budget shortfall. After all, we sitting in a pandemic that that threatened every Washingtonian health and life. So because of our tax system is heavily depending on sales tax, so we have to choose between saving people's lives or saving the state economy, which the revenues, again, heavily depend on sales tax. And so like I shared, there's nothing off the table. At the same time, I can share with you what tax avenue that I'm looking at that I would be supportive of. Number one is capital gain tax. Number two is to close all the loopholes that our state historically has been provided to corporations. And last but not least, really looking at those corporations who would have such a high disparity between the CEO salary versus the lowest pay of the worker from that company, and looking for taxing that particular company more.
Thank you. And we're going to stick with you for our next question, and you will have 1 minute to respond. So recent problems with the West Seattle Bridge, for example, have focused attention on our region's deteriorating infrastructure. According to the Association of Washington Business, Washington State's infrastructure needs are estimated to cost over $222 billion, and funding for these would provide 706,000 jobs. Do you have a plan by which we could start to address the infrastructure needs and also reduce unemployment?
Absolutely. The well-being of the state and the well-being of the people in Washington is always on the top of the agenda. And the particular example that you shared in Washington state, it doesn't sit in appropriations, actually sitting in transportations. And Washington state separate the funding between other general services and transportation and capital as the three different ways of providing funding. So for me, it's about priority. And I think that providing job opportunity to put us back to the economic recovery is definitely on top of mind, and making sure that we have the revenue, the right revenue to steer us in that direction is critical as we working toward this puzzle, solving the puzzle.
Thank you. Candidate Rosenthal, same question, same time frame. Would you like me to reread the question? Okay, so according to the Association of Washington Business, Washington State's infrastructure needs are estimated to cost over $222 billion. And the funding for these would provide 706,000 jobs. Do you have a plan by which we could start to address the infrastructure needs and also reduce unemployment? You have 1 minute.
It's funny, the first time you mentioned the West Seattle Bridge, there is almost, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I was just trying to cut down on the time so you had more time.
Okay. There's almost no one in this in the city of Seattle that's more affected by the closure of the West Seattle Bridge than I. I own a retail strip that is at the exit ramp of the West Seattle Bridge, and it's terrible what has been done with the West Seattle Bridge. I'd like to know why government officials who were in charge of having that inspected didn't inspect it and fix it before it got to this point. I'd like to know why nobody is mentioning how, other than the West Seattle blog, that a bridge of a similar size in Italy that went over a river that goes to France collapsed, and 20 months after the collapse, they had a brand new bridge up. And we're like 7 months down the road here in West Seattle, and we're just talking about the West Seattle Bridge. Why isn't the news media holding the politicians in Seattle accountable for the West Seattle Bridge? Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to stick with you for our next question, and you will have, and this one does come from the public. So in the past year, issues of social justice, particularly for Black Americans, have been the subject of demonstrations, some of which have turned violent, many best-selling books, and interviews with authors. What has been your personal education process on this issue? And as an elected official, what proposals would you make to improve social justice? 2 minutes, thank you.
Kind of a complicated question. I guess one thing I could say, my family, my wife in particular, has done to help with what you might say with educating minorities that are, my wife is a minority herself, minorities that are not as well off. She tutors with Jubilee Kid Reach. She's been doing that for about 8 years. She's tutored one Central American girl for 7 years straight. She's even tutored the child of Brotherhood supporters, and that's the reason her family left Egypt in the 60s, was the Brotherhood was making death threats against her father. And one thing that everyone can do is actually go out there and go to these places. They need tutors and help tutor these people. What you don't want to do is have a race-based allowance into colleges where one race needs one grade, another race needs another, and another race needs another, to try to make the college look like the population. What you need to do is tutor them. And then what you also need to figure out how to do, because both crime, both homelessness, and even admissions to college is heavily affected by having two-parent families. You got to figure out, how do you get people to have two-parent families? Prime example of that, again, is if you go and look around in Bellevue at the exit ramps and you look at the homeless that are begging, you will almost never see an Asian person begging. And Bellevue is 27% Asian. You have to ask yourself why. The reason why is closer family ties. The government needs to somehow bring families together, get people off drugs, which is a big problem in all communities, and get families closer together, and then you'll get more economic prosperity. Thank you.
Okay, candidate Ty, same question, same time frame. Would you like me to repeat any parts of the question?
I'm good, Alyssa. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So your question is about my personal education process in these issues. I can share with you that I continue to learn about this every day. Even though I myself get to experience it personally in my own story, but I wouldn't know how it is other neighbors of mine experience and being impacted by the very system that do not see them as equal. And so as an elected officials and having the opportunity to serve as state representative for the 41st district, I get to learn about our system deeper in the last 2 years. Therefore, I'd love to share with the audience that one of the legislations that I'm proposing in this upcoming sessions is titled Equity Impact Statements. Most of our legislations required, if there is a fiscal note, to be available as part of the decision making. For me, some of these legislations and policies only look at the cost impact, but does not look at the lives that these policies impact. And so when equity impact statement is being accompanied with all the fiscal notes available for legislations, we are forcing the system to look at how a policy being cost so that it can be implemented, but it also how that particular policy would impact the lives of every Washingtonian.
Thank you. We're gonna stick with you, and this will be our last question before we head into closing statements. All right, so in the current Washington gun violence protection laws have come from 3 citizen ballot initiatives after the legislature failed to pass them. Do you support continuing legislative efforts to address remaining gun safety issues, such as centralizing state background check data and allowing the police to destroy confiscated guns rather than selling them to the public? Why or why not? And you have 1 minute and 30 seconds on this one.
Thank you. Yes, I am supportive of many of these legislations that that create a much safer environment when it's come to our gun safety. We have known that through data with the gun safety, it's those that use guns in home for suicide significantly higher than any other cause of death. And because of that, I believe it was 2020 session, we was able to pass the legislation to centralize as far as one checkpoint, one place to register all gun purchases so that we know where these guns, which hands these guns are in, so that we could better protect our citizens and making sure that our kids would not lose their life because of the availability of guns that the adult should be responsible for.
Thank you. Candidate Rosenthal, same questions, same time frame. Would you like them repeated?
Yeah, repeated.
Okay, so do you support continuing legislative efforts to address remaining gun safety issues, such as centralizing state background check data and allowing the police to destroy confiscated guns rather than selling them to the public? Why or why not?
I totally agree with better background checks. I mean, nobody can complain about better background checks. You definitely don't want ever to have people with criminal records to be allowed to obtain guns. As far as selling them back to the public or destroying them, by not selling them to the public, you're not stopping the public from buying them because they can buy them from a gun store. So you're not reducing the number of guns by not selling them. So you might as well sell them and make the revenue because you're not taking guns off the street by melting them. The one thing, as far as if you really want to reduce gun deaths, that I believe you should do is you should have much harsher penalties for committing any premeditated crime with a gun. Good example is, I think it was about a year ago, maybe less, in downtown Seattle. It was over the news, big shootout downtown. I don't know, 1 or 2 people got killed, a lot of people injured. And both of those shooters within the year prior were arrested for gun problems and were already back out on the street. When you're arrested for a gun crime, premeditated gun crime, you should be behind bars for an extremely long time so that it makes a criminal think twice before using a gun in a crime. Thank you.
Thank you. And we're going to stick with you for your 30-second closing statement. So whenever you're ready.
Couple of things in my closing statement. I remember Lisa Wellman mentioned hats off to Black Lives Matter. The one problem in the email that we both got from Black Lives Matter, they want to cut the police in Seattle in half. That's a terrible idea. Seattle doesn't need half as many police. They need twice the number of police. If you ever spent time downtown Seattle or in other parts of Seattle and had to call the police, 2 years ago, the time response was terrible. So less police in Seattle is a ridiculous idea, and that's what Black Lives Matter wants. Thank you.
All right, candidate Ty, your 30-second closing statement, please. Thank you.
Thank you. So I did not set out to become a politician. I was a fighter and a volunteer for the community. I want to build our community better so that every one of us can thrive. Serving in the state legislature, I provide the opportunity for the voice of people like me to be in that space. And with that honor, I'm asking for your vote in the November elections. Thank you.
Great, thank you both so much. We so value your time, and best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so this concludes our candidate forum for the 41st and the 9th. Thank you to everybody who tuned in. We hope that you have the information that you need to cast your vote. Any additional information about what's on your ballot can also be found at www.vote411.org. And now I will go ahead and turn it back over to Amanda. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Alyssa. That was really great. I found the questions fascinating, and at times I wanted them to be able to go on and debate some of these things, which of course we couldn't do. But I really appreciate people who tuned in. Thank you to the candidates. And I especially want to thank some people behind the scenes that this just would not have happened without them. I think first of all, the chair of the Mercer Island League unit, Tony Okada, who went absolutely above and beyond and worked so hard to get this put on like it was. Also behind the scenes that maybe earlier some of you saw, Chelsea Jordan, who is our voter services chair, helped us all along to get this put together, and tonight was also instrumental in handling some of the technical issues. Allison Fair, our administrative manager, also gave us help on getting ourselves set up and handling some of the technical things like getting us back on, taking us off when we needed to be taken off. Charlie Sorensen, who was our timer. I think Rebecca Frankel, who was handling some of the questions so that you were able to see them, and keep them up in front of you. And I hope I haven't forgotten anyone with that. Alyssa, again, thank you so much for being the moderator. Really interesting. And to the candidates, we really appreciate all that they're doing, putting themselves out there, and all of you who I hope learned a lot tonight and feel more confident in how you want to cast your vote. And be sure that you cast that vote, have that vote in the drop box, or certainly mailed long before November 3rd. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. And that's all I have.